and go.
Trump just folded on his economic plan to bring jobs back to the US, and we're going to explain why and why it's important.
Hey guys, how are you? Greetings from Florence, Italy. We're excited to be here with you guys. It's late, but let's get right into this because we were on the news here reports things very differently than are seen, of course, in the United States. And yesterday we were in the UK. And it said Trump's made a mess of everything. So everybody seems to be pissed at Trump over here. But I will tell you what they did today I think it's a more civilized way of a divorce, basically, right? Because, as we know, as you guys might know, we've been trying to do business in China, bring our products in China for a long time. And the goal is always been to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. So, Trump's goal, right? And of course, he is the one who's driving this, right? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, right now, U.S. and China have struck a 90-day trade agreement. So we're dropping our 130% tax on or tariff on China, and we're changing it to 30%. They're changing ours to 10%. I think ours was 130 as well, or right around there. And so both countries have decided that for 90 days, they're going to call a truce. I personally think this is going to be permanent because I think Trump's backing down basically, and this gives him a way out since China is agreeing to it. But that's basically where they're at right now because they both realize how much economic pain, especially Trump, that this was going to cause the US and to China.
So, and I don't think he's backing down at all. So I mean, if you guys go back to the book that I read, we're all real estate people, a lot of us here, The Art of the Deal in 1987. Like one of the very, very first things in that is aim very high, and I just keep pushing and pushing. And so the 145, of course, China matched it. Now we're at 30 and 10, I think are the numbers. Fentanyl a little bit higher. But I think we're I think this is the very beginning of a negotiation.
So what do you think it's going to end up at if you think it's going to work out? Because, we're now basically back to where we started, essentially.
So well, I think you got to go back and take a look at what's happening here. And right or wrong, the last 20 presidents or I should say the last U.S. presidents over the last 20 years have been frustrated because China's refusal to open its markets to the U.S. products. That's actually a huge issue. And among other issues, including Chinese intellectual property, IP, the theft, and all that stuff that's been going on for years, Trump's trying to crack that. And I think the win this week, if I was to say anything, it's that they are now open to the U.S. Entering their market, and so I think this is going to be a series of really, really small moves, and I think that the 145 was really high, but
134
or 145%. What's it 1%?
134%.
Okay, I think that was a high mark. And I think he's going to keep pushing, and I don't think by the way, I really believe that China needs U.S. more. I know we'll take a hit, but if you take a look at the short-term issues, it appears that China felt the impacts much, much quicker. I'm not saying that we wouldn't.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if Trump's plan was to get our products into China. I thought it was that he wanted to bring the U.S. manufacturing back and stop buying products from China. But either way, I don't think that Americans really want those jobs. I think a lot of those jobs want to go to AI anyways. But what I think is interesting is, China was very leveraged on us. We imported $570 billion worth of Chinese products in 2023. So it was a major hit to their economy. They were laying off about a third of the factory workers. We're going to get laid off if these tariffs continued in China. So I don't think that Xi Jinping could continue to do that. But I also think that he's the Communist Party. He doesn't need to worry about being reelected where Trump does. And I don't think Americans wanted to go through that pain. I've been watching different social media videos of people ordering things that were, maybe a $200 outfit and getting a $200 tariff. and they weren't happy. And I just think that's going to affect your voting base. And I think that people around Trump are telling him, like, Americans don't want that. I mean, I'm not saying it wouldn't be good for America, but the people that vote don't want that. A majority of the people are uneducated. They like buying things. They don't want things more expensive.
Well, I think we just got to go to what was said. So if you look at what Trump said, he said the biggest thing to me is opening up China. I think would be fantastic for our businesses, US, if we could go in and compete. And then Bassett said we want a more balanced trade, and I think both sides are committed to that. Adding that the Trump administration would push for China to open up more to US goods. China's trade surplus with the US topped 100 billion last year. So I think that this whole move was just opening the door a little bit for the U.S. to be competitive and actually sell goods and services in China. So that's what I think this was for.
Well, what's interesting is, so if you look at it, now that we're down to a 10% tariff on China, I know Trump said he wanted to bring jobs back, but that's not going to really bring jobs back in the US. I mean, businesses would be better off paying 10% of a tariff than bringing jobs back. So what it'll probably do is cause businesses to maybe offshore to different markets like Taiwan, Vietnam, those kind of things. But it's probably not. I think Trump is backing off bringing jobs back to the US. You're not really hearing that rhetoric. I think that it's going to be tapered down because 10% tariffs aren't bringing jobs back to the US.
No. I agree. I mean, that is where we are now, but it's 90 days. So, but I do believe that jobs and factories coming roaring back, this is Trump's words, into the country is exactly what Trump wants.
It is what he wants, but I think he's backing off of that.
He's backing off, but I think he's looking for little wins. I think he aimed high with the high number and he backed down. And so just opening the door to get our products into China is what he was looking for at this point. And
so you think that he wanted to bring U.S. products into China?
Well, if you just look at the actual words that he used.
Well, I don't like to look at the words that Trump uses.
The biggest thing to me is opening up China. That's exactly what he said this week. So,
but do you think that was a ploy to just kind of get everyone off of his back because he didn't want to admit that his plan wasn't really working that well?
It could be. I mean, this is his actual words were, I think it would be fantastic for our businesses if we could go in and compete. That's what he said. So if you're using his actual words, that's what he said. So, here we are, obviously, and he did back down for 90 days. But I think he shot high and I think he's going to keep chipping away. And I don't think he cares if our stuff goes to Vietnam or some of the other countries that, remember how he went red, yellow, green, and he basically put the countries in different categories. Well, China's in the red category and Vietnam is not. So I think that if you take a look at this, if you just Google what I did, who loses, and China loses by a long shot. They need us. We're at, let's see, the number here, 580 billion of exports per year. That's a huge number, right? And I'm telling you, now on the flip side of that, they do. We owe them $1 trillion,
right?
So
yes,
7% of our debt. So that's a big deal. So but I still think I think this is at the very, very beginning.
Somebody said, Ray said bonds. It was all about the bonds and the debt Trump had to lay off.
You think?
I don't really understand it to that level, how that worked with the bond market, but I do know that
the bond market's important.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I know that first of all, if you take a look at it, the stuff that we get from China, we could actually get from other places. And there are, we both know companies, manufacturing businesses, and people that are already looking to go to other countries. So China's already losing momentum here. I mean, people that used to just have factories in China, people that used to ship stuff from China. If you're a US company and you've been making stuff there and manufacturing them here, like a lot of the big names, you're looking for other sources right now because you don't know where this is heading. And things have slowed down. Businesses are not quite sure what this administration is going to do on both sides. And so I think this is just a way to avoid a global recession right now. It does look like that our GDP is contracted the first time in a long time, and obviously that's kind of our measurement of growth, and that is the first sign of a U.S. recession.
Yeah, and I think both countries realize they need each other. I don't think that either want to admit that because they don't really care for each other. But, we really need China for our cheap goods. And honestly, now that people can't really afford homes and they, are having trouble saving money, the last thing that people want is to then be squeezed on their everyday purchases that they want to make. But then also China needs us because we supply so many of their jobs. So I think that both Trump and Ping are looking at this like they can't stand each other, but they have to work together. Now, what does that mean for the US? It's hard to know. It's going to be hard to bring jobs back into this country without pain. And, nobody wants to go through it. And I'm not saying we shouldn't go through it. It's just people don't want to go through it. So it'll be interesting to see. I know that the stock market has really contracted since Trump started all this. I know that people were worried about inflation. I know that the businesses were unsure what to do. And to your point, businesses are still unsure what to do. So we do think that there's going to be higher levels of unemployment because we are contracting and businesses don't want to expand right now. And because of that, Powell might lower interest rates sooner than later because I think he was really scared of inflation due to these tariffs, but he also has to watch unemployment. So now that, if the tariffs are going to be lowered or disregarded for now, then the Fed can start focusing on unemployment and that might give us lower rates sooner.
Well, that's another point. What happened this week today, I should say, is that the 10-year Treasury yield was up. About 8.2 basis points, and it's at 4.45 last I looked. So that was also not necessarily good for real estate investors. And now, of course, that's good for bonds. So I think, but it also was coming off the heels of the Fed basically saying they're not going to do any changes last week, which I'm sure is, I think Powell said, I'm not expecting a meeting with the president anytime soon. So there's no love lost between those two. He's got another year. And, that people are predicting that rates are going to come down a little bit. We did a whole thing on the U.S. debt, which is huge. As you guys know, there's a big number this year maturing. This is tough. That was back from 2010, 2011, 2012. We actually have maturing debt in the U.S. that we have to renew at these higher prices, higher interest rates. Higher interest rates mean higher cost. That means that a lot of the work that Trump's been doing and his team has been doing for some of these cost-cutting measures, I would say, like DOGE as an example, comes roaring back on this reset of the debt. So because a lot of this debt was at 1-2%. And so that's another big one. In addition to all these tariffs and potential inflation, because I think everybody believes that inflation is going to come as a result of tariffs. We don't know exactly how much or how and where, although it is targeted at certain industries, and I think that's changing, from month to month, it seems, but we will definitely see that. And I honestly can't see. I just read a book, actually on my way over here, called The Big Print. And I do recommend you read that. He talks a lot about where we are on the printing side of the business. And when you just keep adding dollars to all of this, it's unsustainable, especially with the debt we have. So,
well, and it will be interesting going from 1 to 3% to rates above 5. I still think Powell potentially could lower rates in June and blame it on the fact that he's focusing on unemployment and no longer needs to worry about the inflation due to tariffs because they have a lot of this debt maturing in June. And we had talked about that last week. We'll be eventually insolvent if we have to keep paying over 5% on all of the debt that we have. It's
right.
too much.
And there is one positive thing that came out of this, and that is the U.S. dollar did strengthen to a 1 month high against the euro and the yen. It's interesting because we are here in Italy. We were in France and the UK this week. And, so when we're exchanging money, we're seeing the difference. That is good because our dollar buys less here as it got, as you guys know, it's been weak. But it is temporary. It's only been a month.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think moving forward, what'll be interesting is kind of watching the unemployment number. I think that number is going to be a very interesting number to follow. Also, last week we talked about the government stop focusing on inflation and start focusing on the debt, actually. And so that'll be interesting too, to start saying if they said they have the inflation under control now, and they want to start working on the rates and the unemployment numbers.
I'm telling you guys, I think this is the beginning of a brawl personally with China. Trump's always been about chalking up wins. You take a look at when he threatened domestically the security clearances. He won concessions from the law firms. He brandished billions of dollars in the government funding, as we also already know. And he flexes power over a lot of the top government universities, whether you like it or not. This is what he's done. And I understand that some of it might be ethically and constitutionally questionable, but it is what's happening. And so what we have here is we have the trade imbalance. The last 20 to 25 years, the U.S. presidents have not cracked the Chinese market for us supplying products and services there. And I think that that's what this week was. If I was to look through all of this, I'm telling you, I think that's the win for the week. I think it's a 90-day pause. And I still think he's going to come hard at China after this.
But does he have any legs to stand on to come hard at China? Because people are saying that I'm not a Trump fan. Like, I voted for Trump, like whatever. But at the end of the day, does he have any room to stand? Because if he wants to go hard on China, that's going to create a bigger recession here, and people don't want that, and the markets don't want that. So that's his voter base completely, because it's people that own stocks and real estate don't want that, and people that can't afford to buy things don't want things more expensive. So, like, other than Trump, who really wants high tariffs?
Well, I think that that's a simple argument. I get it, but I think you got to look at what he wants, and what he wants is he wants manufacturing back in the U.S. And as long as things can be made cheap somewhere else, that's a way to balance it out. So we're already seeing companies in the U.S. are starting to manufacture things here and do things differently than they were as a result of the tariffs, because they're like, why would I have my stuff made in China if I can have it made somewhere else, potentially even the U.S. We have friends that are doing this right now. Just in the last 90 days, of course. I don't know where this will all end up, but that is at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do here. And so, yes, short-term pain. I can't disagree with you that it is definitely has to turn into higher prices, because the tariffs mean higher prices, whether if they still get it from China or higher prices here. But if you're going to take a look at his overall objective is to make America great again, which is try to get jobs here and try to get manufacturing here, this is how you do it. If you don't do it, companies will still continue to go to these cheap labor countries and have stuff made.
But I have an interesting question, because the Trump's Republican, right? And Republicans now want to bring manufacturing back to the U.S., but they don't want unions. So are manufacturing jobs, do they even pay that great if you don't have unions? Like, are these even good jobs? That's what I don't understand.
Yeah, well, I think that's another layer of government, a union, right? So
yeah, but that's more democratic, So I'm not necessarily for unions. I'm just saying, are these good paying jobs if they're not unionized?
Depends on what the jobs are. It depends on what they start bringing back, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But if you take a look at like just the automobile, I mean, remember when we took a look at that, like like the automobile gets the parts are made all over the place, and then it gets assembled wherever it gets assembled. A lot of times in the US, not always. But you start to look at the pieces, and they're made all over the place. He's trying to bring it all back. By the way, I was just looking today in that book, the great print or the big print. They had a chart in the back, 1949. You take a look at the top number one city was Detroit. And then Ohio, which is where Daniel's from, it had 4 or 5 other cities in there, all based around auto manufacturing. So, we from, the 50s, 60s, by the way, I'm not saying we can get back there. I'm not. What I'm saying is the country was built on America doing their own stuff. And then at some point, we outsourced it all because things got more expensive here, and we allowed it. And and when half the world lives on $2 a day, which by the way they do, if you can believe that, it's a crazy number, but it's true. That you can have stuff made in other parts of the world and make better margin and sell to the consumer cheaper. That's just the reality of it. And so tariffs, like them or not, balance that out. And if you're just following Trump's agenda, which is just trying to get those jobs back to the U.S., again, I'm not disagreeing. I'm not saying it's not going to be inflationary. I'm not saying that things aren't going to be more. I'm not. What I'm saying is that's what he wants.
It is. Yep, it is what he wants. I just don't know. It's for sure what he wants. I just don't know if the economic, because one thing about Trump is he's got to win, right? He always has to have a win. And he wants to be known for, he wants to be praised. Like that's his thing. And so I don't know if he even can take an economic downturn, himself, just his ego. But I also just don't know if the American people can, because he would have to get everything down and then doing really well by the time the end of his term in order for, people to vote Republican, I think, again. Because I think this really is going to squeeze people, because you have to remember, when people can't buy basic things like houses, like cars, like, they're living paycheck to paycheck. Now, if they can't go on Amazon and get cheap stuff, it's a big deal to some people. You know what I mean? Like they don't.
Most people.
Yeah. So I think that this is just really, it's going to be interesting, because I listen to a lot of the Republican shows and the Democrat shows and all the different ones. And even a lot of the Republican shows I listen to is critical of these tariffs. So it'll just be interesting to see, does he really have a plan? Does he really understand it? Because what it looks like is he's kind of backing down to me. And we'll see at the end of these 90 days, but it's almost like he's saving face, because I think he thought a lot of countries were going to negotiate with us, and really, minus a small UK deal, nobody really has.
Well, if you guys are confused like I am, and Danielle is, I will tell you, I'm super excited. We got Jim Rickards coming to Limitless this year. That is insane. He just does not speak very much. I would highly recommend that you Google him. I first read his book called The Currency Wars, which is basically what we're doing right now. He used to work in the government, and I'm telling you, this guy is incredible. He has agreed to come 2 weeks ago. I don't think we've even put it out there yet. These are the questions we're going to be asking him.
Yeah, it's interesting.
What could we expect from all of this, right? It's going to be interesting because it's still 2 months away. Limitless is July 31st at the Gaylord Texan again, and the 1st and the 2nd. In addition to that, we've got, of course, George Gammon, we've got Robert Kiyosaki, we've got Jeff Snyder, we've got Brent Johnson, we've got some of the top economists out there that hopefully they'll all have opposing views. I mean, because that makes the panel the best, is when you go to a big softball and they start arguing over stuff. Because Brent Johnson, we had him on our podcast a couple of times. He's super smart about the central bank, the dollars, and how all this works. But now we're going to sprinkle these tariff things in. We'll see. But hopefully you guys will see us there. We're excited about having Jim Rickards this year for sure.
Absolutely. And if you use code KEN10, you can get 10% off.
Yeah. Hey, and don't forget our podcast.
Yep, we got a podcast every Thursday.
Yeah,
we're also streaming it on YouTube.
Yeah, starting to put the podcast on YouTube. We somebody wise told us to do it, so they're live now on YouTube.
They're not live, but they're on YouTube.
Live, yeah, okay. So they're definitely not live, but they're on YouTube now. And you can watch the whole thing there too. So good debate today.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Like, I'm not against Trump and I'm not even against the tariffs. It's just a matter of, is he going to keep committing to bringing jobs back to the US? Because I don't think it's super popular. So it will be interesting to see what he does.
Well, I think this was a major event this week. It's a de-escalation of what I would consider to be a trade war that was starting to heat up. Both sides digging their feet in. Two of the world's biggest economies. I will say China's very different than it was 50 years ago, right? It now has a full middle class, kind of a lot like, America. But it has sent shockwaves around the world, including other countries, including the UK, which we just flew out of today.
Yep.
And got to Italy. And I'm telling you, it's all over the news. It's funny because we're these newspaper people that are reading newspapers still, believe it or not, they do. We were laughing the other day. This lady had one that said, Trump's making a mess of our economy, and we were in London, and I had to laugh as we were walking by. We were walking out of the park,
I
and
know.
so this is the news all over the place because as they say, when the U.S. sneezes, the world gets a cold, and that's certainly, even though this is a little bit more of one, it is a very interesting time.
Right. Absolutely. Well, thanks you guys for listening, and we'll see you
Cheers,
next week.
guys. I'll see you.